Hey, this is going to be a video on chess improvement, sort of a plan for things to do each day that can help improve your game. I think there's lots of different things people focus on how to improve. Some people do kind of opening, middle game, end game. Um, Eric Kislick offers 6 facets of chess strength. I think they're pretty good. Concrete knowledge, pattern recognition, calculation, candidate moves, positional understanding, and logic. Um, Concrete knowledge is specific knowledge, like opening knowledge or endgame knowledge. In this position, this is the exact thing I'm supposed to do. Pattern recognition is, of course, when we've seen a pattern before and we recognize it again. And the better pattern recognition you have, the more distantly you'll be able to see it, the more different patterns you'll understand. Calculation is more a long game skill. You don't have really the time to calculate much in Bullet or Blitz. Um, but it's when you're really exploring a position and really trying to see as far as you can and having to hold these faraway positions and evaluating them and remembering those evaluations as you look at other things. Candidate moves is the different moves you see as possible. Oftentimes someone sees a few moves and does evaluate them correctly but completely misses a different idea. And the best players are seeing lots more possibilities. And there's this quote from some GM of like, how far do you see ahead? Don't you see so much further ahead than normal players? And they go, no, I just see one move ahead, but it's the right move. And that's, facetious, but they both see a wider variety of moves and are also better at eliminating the candidate moves that do not make sense in the position. A lot of that comes from positional understanding, the next one. Positional understanding goes along with kind of strategic understanding. Where do the pieces belong? Which squares matter? Where should I be fighting? And how can I be improving my position? And logic, I think of, though I haven't read Kislick's books recently, so I might be getting this wrong, I think of this as a very specific to a position. What does the position require of me, and how can I do it? And kind of asking yourself the right question and answering it right for each position. For instance, if there's a mating attack, it might seem really scary and hard to save, but if we can say, okay, the threat is specifically that they're going to play knight g5, then queen h5, then mate me on h7. Do I have anything I can do to stop knight g5? Do I have anything I can do to prevent queen h5? Do I have anything I can do to prevent the queen getting to h7 after? And if you ask those specific questions, you might see like a weird bishop thing where a bishop on a4 comes to c2 and defends h7, or something like that, or a queen a5 check comes to f5 to defend h7 is another really common and important defensive theme to know against that kind of attack. And by saying, okay, the threat's going to be queen h7, how can I make sure that doesn't happen? We might be able to find moves we wouldn't otherwise because we've asked this very narrow question and suddenly we're looking just at that. And it still might be hard to see because it's hard to, see the whole board and see all the possibilities. But I think, what's his first name? I don't remember. Ostrovsky and IM has some nice videos up on calculating various positions. And the calculation's interesting, but a lot of it comes down to asking and answering the right question. And I think the skill he's really working on in those is logic. So lots of skills to work on, and it can be hard to do. But I think the first thing is, and the easiest one to work on, is just pattern recognition. Blitz Tactics is a great site. You can also use Chess Tempo. You can use chess.com's Puzzle Rush, which Blitz Tactics is very similar to. But Puzzle Rush, you only get one free one per day if you don't have a premium account. So I recommend Blitz Tactics. But if you are premium at chess.com, Puzzle Rush is great, or Puzzle Battle. The thing I like about Blitz Tactics is the problem set is actually a little smaller, which sounds like it should be a downside. I think quite highly of The Woodpecker Method, a book by Axel Smith, where he argues that by repeating the same problem sets and by getting faster and more precise and better at those, you will get better, larger improvement than by doing a variety. And I think this really fits with some training he had in his previous book, Pump Up Your Chess Rating, with this idea of repetitions are just very useful in learning anything. And often we seek kind of knowledge, we seek to learn and see more things, but what we actually want is skills. And the way to get skills is to repeat something over and over till it's ingrained. And that actually helps us do more thinking. It might sound like you're automating stuff, but the more stuff you make automatic, the more time you have to think about the other really complicated stuff that, of course, chess still contains. So I think doing a thing like Blitz Tactics, Haste, and just doing 1 or 2 of these a day. I'm going to do one. I hope I do well. I'm going to be thoroughly embarrassed if I don't. so I might not talk so much during it, but I'm just giving an example. But doing just one of these a day, and I've seen lots of the problems before, is going to be good practice. Here I want to take bishop, because otherwise rook b7 will fork me. I can win the knight on f3. This is a standard mating net where my bishop covers g1. It's checkmate. I don't want to take because they get my queen, but I can pin the rook to their queen. All of these problems I've seen before, and that won't be the case for all of them. I can just take this. Ah, it's the queen f5 to cover h7 thing I just talked about. Here it does not hold. I could just take. Hadn't seen that one before. I can push. I want to deflect the defender. Yeah. So just doing something like some kind of tactics practice is really good for both pattern recognition, but also for getting this kind of feeling of what should be candidate moves. And a lot of people and coaches talk about, that hangs the knight, talk about checks and captures. And when doing tactics puzzles, you really start always looking for checks and captures. And if those don't work, then kind of, I think the next thing to look for is either forks or times where you attack something more valuable with something less valuable. Attacks with less, which is a Dan Heisman thing to focus on. All credit to him. It's the fastest mate. Can I just take this rook? Yeah, nice. What was I talking about? Totally lost my train of thought. Yeah, so you could count this as just pattern recognition. But I find it helps your candidate moves as well. You look for more moves. Knight f5, yeah. You look for more moves. You also, I find when I'm doing a lot of tactics, have a better sense of where my pieces belong. And so I think it can be looked at as just the one thing. How do I want to start here? Queen e3, yeah. Just training one thing, but I think actually it's pretty broadly useful. No, my computer's making noise. I apologize. I was hoping it wouldn't. It does after a little while on every video I attempt to record. So hopefully the rest of the video is still watchable. This looks like a trapped queen. So the first thing, and I think the easiest thing to work on, is do some tactics each day. It's just great for your pattern recognition. You know, tactics are a huge part of chess. Start with tactics. Tactics are an easy thing to start on. Is this queen f7? No, I get back ranked. I can just take and get the queen. Ah, there's a bishop. Oh, let's get rid of that bishop. Oops. Oh no, that's terrible too. What am I doing? Alright, I'll take the knight. Let's get rid of the bishop with check. Okay, we ruined a good run, but, you know, it happens. Just take this. I think the bishop comes in. No, this way, right? Yeah. I like that it sometimes gives you almost if you play like a mate a few moves slower than the fastest. Oh, no, of course. Bishop takes and then queen h5. Oh. And when you finish, spending a little while thinking what was the answer to the last one you were on is useful because you might see it again. Again, repetitions are really useful. So it's just rook f8, because if queen takes, I can take the rook. And if king f8, I have queen d8 check. King f7. Ooh, where is it? Rook f8, queen f8. Or king f8. Queen d8 check, king f7. Say queen e7 check. If they go to g8, I have queen e8 check. They have to block with their queen on f8. We trade and I take on g3. But they can play king g6. Is there a win after king g6? I could also have the same thing with my queen on d7. But I think e7 looks better. Man. I'm not seeing it. Rook f8, king f8, queen d8, king f7. Something clever. Queen e7, king g6. I made it immediately if I stopped checking, so this all seems pretty forced. Well, this is a terrible example for my video, because I'm now not going to be able to do the thing I said I was going to do. Well, if you can't solve it, we can open the editor on Lichess and put in the problem, which I will now proceed to do. Yeah. Is it showing the right thing? I think so. Okay. Clear board. Man, this is going to make this take a lot longer than it was supposed to. Knight, king, queen, rook, pawns. Oh, one nice thing is if you make a mistake on a Lichess problem, so you've screwed up the last problem, you can still try to make moves with whatever piece you moved with last. And so whatever piece you made your mistaken move with, you can try all the other moves with that piece just to test if they work. Not super useful, but can occasionally mean if you're confused and just want to brute force your way to an answer, it can be done. Let's turn on computer analysis. White to move. Rook f8, king f8. Queen d6. Ah, of course, because we can push them back now. And then we get a standard mating net. So I just didn't consider a check and a capture. And I should have looked at it. I didn't see the difference between this and queen d8. And indeed, after queen d8, there's no breakthrough. But after queen d6, because we get this check here, it works. Okay, well, I got my face. So first thing to do, blitz tactics. Just do a blitz tactics or two a day, try to get a high score. I recently set a personal high score of 61, but depending on your strength, lots of scores are great. I have a 2,000 strength friend whose high score is just over 30, and I think it's pretty good. I've just spent a lot more time, so I recognize a lot more of the problems, but I also think it really helps my spotting of tactics in games and my awareness of kind of where weak pieces are going to be. So I think that's a big one. I think for pattern recognition, it's pretty easy to do a little work every day, not spend too much time. I think it's fun doing blitz tactics. It's fun aiming for high scores. Just do a little every day, and it's going to help. And I don't think it's bad for other things. Like, it's not serious calculation, but it's in its direction. It's not really positional understanding, but you see sort of, oh, that piece looks awkward. That looks strange, and that's where the tactic is. And by seeing that a lot, I think positional understanding is relevant to it, even though I think most people disagree with me. It's not going to get a lot of candidate moves, but you are going to certainly start looking at more checks and captures, and that is useful for candidate moves, and for knight forks, and for attacks with less. And this is all useful things to include in your candidate moves. Now, I would like to move on to concrete knowledge. Most people that are trying to improve like to play. We all, we enjoy playing chess. That's what we want to do. And so what I would say is, white, that's a shame. I was hoping to give a black example, is after each game, check where we could have improved. And you could do a batch of like 5 games. This is an accelerated dragon. I'm going to play not the Maraxi bind line. Okay, I think I have to castle here so that they can't take on e4. I have bishop b3, so there's no queen b4 tricks. I'm going to stop knight g4. I'm going to play rook e1. Try to play knight d5. Queen e2, maybe knight d5 immediately, but I want to bring the rook to d1. I'm going to play knight d5 at some point soon. I'm not sure what the rook is doing on e8, but I'm sure my FM opponent knows what they're doing. I could play f4 and try to push for e5. I could also play knight d5. I think I like knight d5. It can make my bishop look a little bad, but if I can move my c-pawn up after, then the bishop can kind of reconvene into the game, and it can make the e-pawn a permanent weakness. They can't take because of bishop g7. I wanted to play c4 anyway, I think. And hopefully e7 is a weakness here. Try to play h4, h5, soften up their king position a little. I don't mind them taking on d4. I'm not sure it helps me to take on g7. I think these pawns are all pretty defensible, and the b3 pawn does a nice job defending c4. I'd love to be able to meet a b5 type move with c5, but I don't think I ever have it. Okay. Now I would like to play rook e4, going at this weakness, and try to create a second weakness. I think rook e4 is useful first. It also makes sure if my queen moves that e1's defended against their queen. Oh, I haven't even talked about what I'm doing with this part. So yeah, so play a game, and then go back over it, and you're specifically looking for 3 things. First, where is the moment you left book? You know, we all have our personal amount of concrete opening knowledge. Where's the moment you left that opening knowledge? And just doing this with each game, just adding one move. Okay, I didn't know what that was. What's happening now? Or maybe, you know, you played 15 moves. Maybe I played 15 moves of book this game. And that looks very dangerous. So I can take on e7. I can also play h5 first. I should think about this. Rook e7, queen e7, rook b2. They're still on my e1 rook, so I can't like take on d6. But if I play queen e8 check, king g7, rook f7, rook e7, they can play... How many checks do they have? They're not going to have any checks, I don't think, besides a1, and then I just go to h2. I don't know how they defend f7 at the end, so I'm going to go for this. Maybe I didn't see something, but... Check. How do they get to defending f7? Oh, they... Queen a1 and rook f2. Okay. I think I'll play h5. They can play queen d2, which is annoying. So rook e7, queen a1, king h2, rook takes f2, defends f7. It's okay, let's play h5. I'm expecting queen d2. I'm not sure if I have h6 there. Okay, that's an interesting way to attack it. So if I play h6, yeah, because at worst I'm going to be able to take on f7 after checking their king forward, and that will defend the required squares and put their king hopefully on a bad square. I could play rook e5 check. That's cute. They can't take because the pawn's pinned to their queen. But I think they just play something like... No, they don't want to play king f6. Because of queen e7 check. No, that's probably fine for them. Okay, let's just take f7. I suspect they will take c4. I'm now going to be down a pawn, so I'm going to need compensation. I think rook e3 looks good. No, they have rook b1 and then queen f4, forcing queens off. Do not want to allow queens off. Maybe just g3. Let's just prevent that. Oh, I'm low on time, playing far too slowly. If their queen moves now, I have queen f4 to h4 checkmate. So I just have to be quick. And I think I'm in good shape. That doesn't defend the checkmate threat. Okay, well, that was a lucky finish. So I think I played a fairly good game. So I feel bad not giving rematches if someone wants it. So okay, we'll play a set of 2 Blitz games. That'll give us 2 things to look at. I will try to play a triangle defense or a... Alright, we have a triangle. I like to take on c4, try to hold the pawn. Okay. So we're up a pawn. And the big question is, can we develop our king side without losing everything? I'd like to play a6. Perhaps I should have played it already. But it looks like we've stabilized. My queen should probably go... What's the stablest square? c7, b6. Their bishop could come out this way. Both would be unstable, and I might go to c8. But as is, I feel like I have a lot of options with the queen. I think c7. If they ever play e5, my knight gets d5. Alright, let's bring my rooks to, I think, d8 and c8, and then look for the c5 push. Okay, expect knight e4. I'll play h6. Knight g5 lines can be very scary. Maybe I have a knight coming to b4, but maybe I should just be looking to play c5 next. Probably have to get my queen off the file with their rook. b6 looks like a pleasant enough square. Still a little worried about my king, because I do not have pieces over there for the defense, so they immediately target that. Knight f8, bishop f8, both look like useful moves. But I could also say I don't believe you. Let's go for c5. They should play g6, I think. And then occupy g5. I will take and play knight f8, and I think I can defend everything. But I would look for the g6 break if I was them. Okay, so the things we want to look for. First of all, we're going to look where did we screw up in the opening, or where were we first out of book in the opening. Ooh, now that I have to take back, I won't have knight f8, but I do threaten to trade their knight on e4. That's a critical piece, so they're just swapping it off. Interesting. Okay, curious what they got. We'll take bishop. Show me the problem. I can take knight. Discovery on the queen. I think they missed this. If I had to take pawn, it was quite scary, but I can just take knight. I'm also threatening f2. Yeah, this is just over now. I think they missed this. This was a clever idea. Yeah, okay. So, hit 2400. Nice. So, let's look at the last two games. Where was I out of book is the first question. And then the second question is, what is an opening idea that the computer suggests that I did not think of? You know, what's a candidate move? So the first one we do is I improve my concrete knowledge of the opening. I learn a move that I didn't know in the opening. Ideally, I would add it to some database. I'm not going to do that because I'm lazy here. I know that's bad to do in this example video because you shouldn't be lazy, but just learn one new idea in the opening, and if you do add it to your opening database, your study on Lichess or wherever else, that's a good thing to do. So I'm going to turn on both the computer and the database. So this is all common theory. I was right that castles is the main move here. The threat was knight takes e4 because this is pinned. Then bishop b3, d6, h3, bishop d7, rook e1, knight takes d4, bishop takes d4, bishop c6. Looks like this has all been played before. And knight d5 immediately is the main move. So we have a question. Why is knight d5 better than a preparatory move like queen e2? Well, I'm probably going to get the same position type, right? That I got with queen e2. I'm still going to have this. I'm still going to take back this way. But I've spent a couple moves on this, and maybe there's better things to do, and I know I'm going to commit to knight d5. So knight d5 makes some sense to me. So I should go for knight d5 immediately. I don't have a problem on e4 yet. d4 is still well defended. After my move queen e2, ooh, knight h5. That's an idea I wouldn't have thought about. Maybe coming to f4, but also immediately questioning the bishop. Okay, but knight d5 immediately is the best move. Now, in the game, they took with their knight. So let's assume they did that, and let's explore that a little. Ooh, this is just winning. I didn't know, because they don't have time to defend e7. And if we look at the game, after I played queen e2, they had time for rook f8. Okay, so that's the big difference here, is after the immediate knight d5, they can't take knight. So they have to take bishop if they want to take, then defend the pawn. This is why they played rook f8, a move I was confused by. And then c3 or c4 sort of solidifies everything on my queen side. I have the two bishops. I still have this h4, h5 idea. Okay, so the opening thing for me to learn is knight d5 on move 13 here. I don't need to spend time getting my queen out of the way, bring my rook to the middle. I should go for knight d5 immediately, and the key is I want to go knight d5 when e7 isn't defended. So I should both think, here's the move I didn't know, and also, what's the cue that this is a move I should be looking for? Why this move now? And the cue I didn't see immediately. The explanation I immediately gave was not the correct one. The correct one is that e7 is vulnerable, And so knight d5, with the immediate opening of the e-file, targets what I did correctly recognize as the weakness, but I went after wrongly. Now, we could explore a little further and see if there's another big idea I missed. I went for knight d5. I did consider f4. I did not consider something like queen e3. That's a little strange to me. All right, and so c4 was a bad move. Why? So queen e3 or queen e4, I just have like a pleasant position where e7 is still a weakness. But c4 is specifically bad because of bishop takes, rook takes, e5. Wow, didn't consider that at all. Now if I take, they take back rook presumably, and suddenly everything's losing time. My rook's hit. If I retreat my rook, they've had time to get their e-pawn off the weakness. So they have this really remarkable e5 push. Okay, so we've seen this a new idea. In this position, I should play something that keeps the bishop hitting e6 so they don't have this e5 trick because the bishop's on it. And by playing c4, I give that up and allow this, really high-level e5 move. Okay, so we've done two things in this game. The first thing we did was we saw where's the point where I didn't know the opening and made the wrong move. And the answer is here. I should play knight d5 and figure out the cue, specifically because e7 is weak. So next time I have this kind of position, I'll be thinking, when is e7 weak, and look to play knight d5 at that moment. The second thing is an idea I hadn't thought of or seen before, generally in the middle game, which is an opening thing, right? I'm learning something about this structure I get reliably out of this opening. In this case, c4 cuts my bishop off from hitting e6, and black has ideas with this e5 break now and can rid themselves of the target, the weak pawn. And the third thing, I think, is to think about Jacob Agard's 3 questions. And Eric Kislik adds a few, and we'll mention them quickly, but what are the weaknesses, which is the worst place piece, and what is my opponent's idea? Kislik adds, possibly among other things, but I think the key ones are who benefits from a queen trade, and what's the other? Oh, what are the pawn breaks? So in this position, I actually think I did a pretty good job on these fronts. I was aware of what the weakness was and did target it, and the variation we see here, what does my opponent intend? Well, they're trying to play this e5, and I allowed it. And why are they intending it? To get rid of this weakness. I correctly identified the weakness. Another thing I was doing was I was looking for c4, so the bishop might have a way to reposition into the game, or c3 for the same reason. What's happening? That was weird. Anyways. So thinking about what were the weaknesses in this game and did I do a sufficient job targeting them? I think in general I did. I was not aware of my opponent's best idea, though they were not either, and afterwards I got about equal position. What are the pawn breaks? They knew theirs was the b pawn. They did not realize they had an e break, and I knew mine was the h pawn. To soften up their position, I targeted the weakness successfully. I took it and had a very good position, which I promptly did not convert. Ooh, rook e4. Interesting. So it defends all the potential checks of my king on h2. And can shuttle over to attack an f7. That's a complicated move to find. Okay. So the first two things were I improved my concrete knowledge. I'm repeating myself so much, but it's so hard when you're trying to think about the position as well. First thing, increase your concrete knowledge of the opening, right? Check where in the opening you went astray. Second thing, learn something about the middle game. It might be about the pawn structure of the opening. It might be about where your pieces belong, but see some idea in the middle game you're not familiar with. For me, it was that black has this potential e5 break, this remarkable move, e5, getting rid of their weakness. And the third is just to scan over the game quickly, thinking, what are the weaknesses? Is there a weakness they had? A backwards pawn, a vulnerable pawn, a misplaced piece, something I could have attacked and didn't. Is there anything like that that I didn't consider in the game? And just look over it with a quick eye to, were there targets I didn't see? And were there targets I created in my own position that I just didn't have to? And you want to look over it. What's the worst place piece? if there was a moment when one of your pieces was way out of play, did you think to find a way to improve it? You know, and if you scan through and the computer's suggesting, like with your knight on a3, knight b1, thinking, the knight really is doing nothing, and maybe this way it gets somewhere good, right? It could be anything. But what's the worst place piece? What is my opponent intending? In this case, it was to rid themselves of the weakness. I think this is a less useful one to look back at games with, but really looking back and thinking, were there any weaknesses I failed to target, and how would I have, or could I have? Even if it wasn't necessarily good, what are different ideas where I could have? Because we want to be like expanding how many candidate moves we're seeing, and we want to be thinking more about this positional concept of what are the weaknesses and what is the worst place piece. Because I think so much of positional play is just realizing which piece needs improvement and what the targets are in the position. And the target could be a weak square. You know, the pieces are on the board, so it changes it. But like f6 and h6 are now very weak squares with the bishop gone from g7. So just playing a couple games and going through and doing these things. So now let's look at the other game I played. Let's go to the analysis board. So I don't know this opening super well. I believed I want my repertoire is to take on c4, and I think it is, and then to try to hold with b5. Ooh, okay, so we've already learned an idea. I might have just queen f6. How do they defend the rook? I don't know how they defend the rook. Queen f6, knight c3, b4. Can they defend the rook? The computer doesn't think it's such a disaster for them because my queen's a little awkward. So I go to d8, but like, I just want a piece. I'm just up a piece. I mean, the computer's giving -1, but I'm up a piece. Okay, so that's interesting. So I've already learned a whole opening idea that I just was not familiar with. If they play b3 early and haven't pushed their d-pawn, because normally their d-pawn's on d4, oops, ugh, I might just have queen f6. And there's a similar idea in the Queen's Gambit Accepted, if we go back to the start, that I am familiar with. d4, d5, c4, dc4, e3, where black tries to hold the pawn and does a really poor job of it, where there's this queen f3. But oftentimes you see one idea like this, and you might recognize it again in the exact same position, but it doesn't stick. Again, we want repetitions. So every time you see an idea like this, like I just did, where I had no idea this queen f6 move existed, but it makes sense, and I've seen something similar. And if I go back and look at the similar thing I saw and connect the two, my brain is much more likely to make the connection during a game I play. So even if it's an idea you've seen before, but in a slightly different position, treat it as similar, as worth connecting, but as a new idea you have to think about again, because that's going to make it, and you want to connect it, but you also want to treat it as an idea you spend a little time looking at, just to make sure you get what's happening in this specific version, and so your brain can make the connection later when you need it in a game. Okay, so I have queen f6 here. I instead took, which was the only thing played in a master game, and here I played bishop b7. That might be wrong, but normally you want to play a6 quickly to solidify the pawn, but they don't have the a-pawn break anymore because they took back a-pawn, so I didn't think I needed it here. And I thought the rush was to make sure my kingside was developed and I could get castled. So that's what I did, and that looks like it was pretty reasonable. So I probably just didn't need a6. I felt like I'm supposed to play it at some point, and if they move their knight, suddenly the pawn will be pinned to my bishop and they'll be threatening knight b5. But they haven't moved it yet, so I'm in no rush, so I shouldn't have played a6 yet. Should have continued developing. Now here it looks like I didn't pick the right square for the queen. b6 did end up being a square I moved to, because they're going to play rook c1 at some point, and I just don't want my queen lined up with their rook. And I was thinking about how they could hit me on the dark squares, because often the bishop's very rarely on b2 in this opening, except in the note boom variation, but that's a quite different position. So I was thinking, how do I best handle the fact that their bishop isn't on e3 or f4? So I thought that opened up c7 and b6, but I should also have been thinking about what file they have, and thus c7 is a vulnerable square. So I already have this queen f6 idea, and that against the bishop on b2, my queen still doesn't belong on c7 because they have the half-open c file, and I should go to b6 instead. So we have a number of ideas that are new. So I should have played for the c5 break immediately. And now they can go e5, and they're supposed to trade. Interesting. So my pawn structure actually is hard to make improvements on after some kind of trade. So the computer interestingly recommends ed5, and that brings up the question of the worst place piece, because my knight on d7 is a little awkward. Maybe it can go back to f8 and defend a potential weakness, but b6 doesn't really have much hope, and I don't always get the c5 break. And for instance, if they take and if I take back pawn, I hang my queen. But and if I could take back this pawn, my knight then wouldn't have really any squares. And so the problem piece in a lot of times is this knight. Another problem piece, if I was to take back this way, is this bishop. Again, I can't take back that way because I'd hang my queen. But if I could, I'd have these two problem pieces. And one thing I like about ed5 is the knight then has access to a good central square. So just looking through and noticing ideas, and ideas that you didn't consider are especially important, and spending a little while. And if you can make a connection in your head, if you can get your brain firing, ooh, this is similar to that other thing, then you'll be more likely to see both this and that other thing the next time it comes up. So I played h5. I thought about hg5. I wasn't sure. I did not consider c4 here. And here, they thought they had a clever version of knight f6, but it just loses on the spot. G takes f6 also works, but I thought this was a good way to close it. So okay. There's one more thing I'm going to recommend for this kind of daily thing, but one is just play 2 Blitz games a day and check them. And try to look for what's a new idea, what's an improvement I can make in the opening, or at what moment was I not sure what I was supposed to do in the opening, and maybe you did make the right move, but just double checking that and going, oh, I now know that's the right move, and maybe I know exactly why. So first, find where you can improve in the opening. Second, find a new idea, like queen f6 in this game. And third, scan through the game, see if there were any kind of weak points or poorly developed pieces, and just think a little about how you could maybe have improved them. And it could be all fantasy, it doesn't have to actually apply. Thinking, okay, if they ever trade knights here with knight takes d5, and I take back e-pawn, then maybe knight f8 to e6 becomes a possible idea. Doesn't have to happen, doesn't have to be relevant to the game, but just seeing different ways to improve weaker pieces and thinking about them, really useful. So those are the 3 things I would recommend for looking through your games. And then the final thing I'm going to recommend is look through one high-level game. So I was doing this with a memorization project. You do not have to do it with memorization, but look through one high-level game. Here's a list of games that I used. We have 3 Paul Morphy games. I tended to go for shorter games. 3 Adolf Anderson games if you like really aggressive, spectacular attacks. They don't necessarily work. They usually work at the end, but not necessarily throughout. But learning how the opponent could have defended better is important too. I really love Steinitz von Bartholeben. I think it's one of the greatest games ever. The other 2 here are not as spectacular, but are very nice games. The Chigorin games are good. Pillsbury's games are all great, especially if you're a 1d4 player. Some Tarrasch games. I really like this Schlechter-Mason game. I think that's a very good one. I think it's a really nice example of kind of developing your pieces and every move being purposeful and finding nice transitions into the next part of the game, where pieces are going to come off, but how to do it to maintain an initiative and an advantage as the game continues into a very nicely played rook endgame. I think that one's really a special game that would be easy to treat as, oh, a normal game of someone beating a weaker player. But Rubinstein's are also very good. So this is my list, and I recommend all these games. I think they're useful games to use. Of course, you can find other great games. There are arguments for the classics as more useful games to study for most players than for modern games. I think it's a fairly good argument, but you could certainly go more modern. But the idea is you pick one of these games. Now, I like memorization as the project, but it doesn't have to be that. But you pick one of these games. Morphy, Verks, Duke Karl, Count Isouard, a game like that. And you go through it on your own, and you don't see the next move, and each move you write down a few thoughts. Maybe it's a comment on the last move, why you think it was good, why you think it was not so good. Maybe it's a prediction of what will happen next. You can do this in a guess the move format if you choose. I think that's a nice way to do it. You can really, but you want to get down your thoughts. What are you thinking about this position? Maybe you're evaluating, maybe you're just looking for ideas and throwing out ideas, especially if it's a game you've never seen before. Maybe you're giving what you think are the critical variations. But get down some of your ideas. As many as you can, write them down. Next day, come back to the game, and just on an empty board, or a starting position board, try to play out as much of the game as you can, and try to remember all the different ideas and sub-variations. And You don't have to have a perfect memory of it. If you forget something, you can check. Most people won't be able to replay the game, but you're going to do better the more ideas you put down and the more ideas you thought about and explored, because the more the moves will make sense to you. And some games people pick to do stuff with, I think a lot of the moves are interchangeable. It didn't matter what order these 6 moves happened in, or there were kind of 6 slightly imprecise but no big deal moves in a row and some like dull collie or whatever. And I don't think those games are very useful because it's hard to replay them. And it's really nice to be able to replay them because you'll only be able to do it well if you understand the moves. And if you really explored it well, you should be able to. And this doesn't have to be exhausting or anything. These are mostly short games. The Morphe Duke Carl Count Isouard game is 17 moves. But just so you've done your blitz tactics, you've played 2 games and just done a quick run through them looking for ideas. And finally, you play through 1 good game, and then the next day, and write down thoughts. And again, doesn't have to be exhaustive, but write down some thoughts the next day. Try to replay what you can of it, look at it again, see if you have any new thoughts coming with a new perspective. These games have lots to find in them. And then on the 3rd day, check it with the computer and see what you missed. And then the 4th day, replay it again, trying to do as much as you can on your own. And with what you learned from the computer, just trying to recite and understand and show. And I like doing it as if I'm speaking to someone, as if I'm recording a video. I want it to be conversational. The more I can vocalize what I'm thinking, the more complete my understanding is going to be, and the more it's drilled into my brain in a way that I can turn into a skill instead of being just knowledge. And someone claimed if you memorize like one of these games, and have it memorized, you just know it, you understand it. And I think memorize can be misleading because memorize makes it sound like by rote, when in fact, to memorize it, you really have to display understanding. And by doing that, someone claimed you memorize one of these games, you know it, you understand it, you're at least a 1400, you memorize 10, you're at least a master. Don't think that's quite true, but I really think it's a worthwhile exercise to explore a game a few times, spot all the things you can, keep exploring, keep learning about the games. Again, I like repetitions. I really think they're a great way to learn. So as a study course for someone, I think this covers, you get your pattern recognition, your tactics, you improve your openings constantly, you're constantly re-looking at them. I think people study openings once quite often and then never really look at them again for years until they change openings, and that's just not the way to get better at openings or to improve. I think we're learning about candidate moves because we're seeing in our openings what are ideas and possible moves we didn't look at. And we're getting better positionally. We're looking for weaknesses, we're looking for what the weakest piece was, and repositioning schemes. And I think this is a non-painful way to improve at a bunch of facets of your chess game. You get to play a bit, Blitz Tactics is fun, annotating a game, because you're basically at the end, you're picking a game and you're going through it and you're annotating it. But you don't have to do it in this like formal, extensive form that feels so much like work. Instead, you can be throwing out ideas. You can be spot a few variations that look interesting and then move on. You could do it as a guess the move format where you think a little, you pick a move, and you move on. You give yourself a score if you get it right. And finding a way to make that fun. And I think you do these 3 things each day or as many days as you can, and without needing, a coach or anything else. You have a pretty useful way to try to move forward with your chess and fill your mind with different ideas that you hope to solidify into skills. So there's a video on trying to improve. Cheers.